So in today's podcast, I have the pleasure of being joined by Stanley, one of the brains behind the golf stats, data and betting advice website, tourtips.com. Welcome to the pod, Stanley. It's great to have you on. How are you?
I'm good. Hi, Pete. Glad to be here.
Yeah, great to have you on. So I understand we have to be a little bit cautious about just how much we can reveal about you and the others who oversee Tour Tips for various reasons. So what can you tell the listeners, first of all, about those of you that run Tour Tips and what it is the website offers?
Yeah, I've been running Tour Tips now. We're in our 25th year now. It's something that I set up in the 1990s. It was around a betting community. Used to be online forums and things that used to post on back in those days before Twitter and everything else. And it was about trying to provide a statistical resource to help fellow bettors in terms of golf betting. Betting was in golf in particular was becoming really popular with the rise of Tiger Woods. And we all saw that with our knowledge of golf, plus a little bit of statistical knowledge, we could have quite a big advantage over the bookies. And that's the way it transpired. And it's just grown and grown from there as golf betting has become ever more popular.
And you have a real interest in betting yourself and those who work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something we've been doing for 20 plus years. And it's something I enjoy. I enjoy the data side of it. It's part of what I do as my day job. The website this is what I do to enjoy myself. Okay, in terms of the combination of stats, how can you use statistical analysis, put that into a format that helps others, but also crucially helps myself in terms of earning some money and seeing how things work out. So yeah, it's what it is. It's what I do. Still doing it 20 odd years later.
It sounds like it's a passion for you. You have an interest in stats and obviously golf and betting, so it all syncs up quite nicely. So what can you tell? Obviously, you've worked on it for 25 years. I understand there are other people. What can you tell me about them? Because when we did some communication previously, you told me some would be very familiar names to anyone who's followed golf betting in the UK over the last decade. What can you tell us? I'm just trying to eke out as much as I can.
These are people who work full-time in the golf betting arena. And what they do is as a sideline, again, as sometimes a bit of interested in the stats, interested involving themselves in betting advice, and they'll do that through Tour Tips. Again, anyone who's been involved in golf betting in the UK over the last decade will know the names, but because they work full time, what we do with Tour Tips is we have a kind of a whole site approach. My name's the names of the others, but what we want to do is to say, this is the approach at Tour Tips. It's stats-based analysis to provide betting advice for golf. Okay, and it doesn't really matter who's doing it. We're all following that same mantra in terms of this is how it can help you, and these are some of the tips that we can provide, but also some of the pointers as to how you can use statistics to help guide your golf betting, or at least provide a short list for you to look at.
So it's fair to say some serious people, it's people with not just a passing interest, but people who use it day in, day out, people who are involved in the betting side of things as well and understand all of that. So it's not just somebody who likes golf, it's about the betting and the data within that as well. Does that perhaps explain a little bit about what you actually have available on the website? Because you have a free and you have a paid parts of the website. One of the things we've looked at and reviewed quite positively are some of the free tips you put out, especially on the PGA, where you've got a very good long-term record. But there's a lot more than that. So could you outline what is available through the website and what the listeners can enjoy access to through both the free and paid side of it?
Yeah, we've always said that betting tips will always be free to access on the website. That's been the case for the whole 25 years or so we've been going, and that will remain in place. In terms of other parts that are free, then you can get current and course form for both the PGA Tour and the DP World Tour. So those two events each week. For each player, you'll be able to see how they finished in the last 8 weeks and how they performed on that course in the last 5 times it's been used. So that's starting information for golf betting in terms of, are they playing well? Does this course suit? It's always free, and that's a key starting point for any kind of golf betting. Where you move beyond who's going to do well to who's going to do better than the bookies think, and turn it into actually going to make some money out of this in terms of gambling. That's where the other stats come into it, the other angles beyond basic, are they playing well, have they done well on the course? So our paid sections of the site are in terms of the different statistical tables. It'll go through For example, the strokes gained data off the tee, tee to green, approach to green, all that kind of stuff. Put every player in the field. It will go through the different tables around other aspects. So it'll look through statistical analysis, to look through how they've done in that particular location, not just the course. And it's about providing that for every single player in the field. And then if you click on a player's name, you can get a full breakdown, what they've done, their form, how they play the different components of their game, driving distance, driving accuracy, greens and regulation, so on, strokes gains data, how they done that course, how they done the location. For each player in each event, and again, this is not just for the PGA Tour, a lot of sites will focus on the PGA Tour, what our approach is. Stats are available not just for one tour, they're available for all tours. When the bookies offer golf betting markets, they do it for lots of different tours, particularly UK bookmakers. So we want to provide that level of analysis, not just for one tour, but we cover 14 tours in depth. You get that for PGA Tour, DP World Tour, Champions Tour, LPGA Tour, so on and so on, for 14 different tours. And that means that that's your basic events stats. Beyond that, you've got profiles of each individual event, again, statistical analysis, trend analysis, what the top 5 done, what have been the key markers for them that have finished in the top 5, because that's normally the place finishes for golf for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Go through all the things they're after. And it's, like I said, we could probably go through all the different sections of the site and I'll be here a long time, which is, it's a lot there for people to look into, to find if you've got an angle that you like, you look at it, you test it, you make sure it works. Because beyond course and current form, it's everything else that gives you value relative to the odds. And that's what we provided to our tips.
Yeah. So the user can take just the tips or have a look at some of the free stuff, like I think the free event stats is very good at a glance information and both course and current form and some of the key stats. But people, if they wish to, they can go a little bit more detailed. And I'm curious about data in golf because we've seen it with football, the XG, which is just the tip of the iceberg. You see it with racing, with sectional timing. Some sports seem to embrace data a lot quicker and easier than others. Where does golf sit on that front? And I have to wonder about the provision of data from some of these tours as well themselves. How is data being used by the golfing world?
There's a lot of data available for golf. It's, like I say, it's kept the site going for 20 odd years. It's the new area in data for golf is this concept called strokes gained, and it helps you to identify what was the contribution of driving or iron play or short game in terms of what score was recorded on any particular hole. There's a lot of data in golf. I'm going to draw the distinction between data that helps you understand why a player's played well and data that helps you bet on golf. And I think those are two quite different things.
Could you explain them?
There's a lot of focus. If you look on Twitter, if you look on a lot of new websites, will focus very much on strokes gained. They'll focus on PGA Tour for one, which is the biggest and the most famous for the tours. And there'll be a lot of focus on this is what you'll need to do well in this particular course. The key statistic is strokes gained, tee or strokes gained around the green, or putting or shot strokes gained, or scoring from 75 to 100 yards because it's a relatively short course. If I was to say, okay, let's take a game of the weekend, a football game of the weekend, Manchester City beat Everton 3-0.
Thanks for that.
If I was to look at that...
You had to bring up that example, didn't you? Go on. No, it's okay.
So I'm going to be careful about City and United, I know. Let's take an extreme example. We can look at after the event and say, okay, Manchester City dominate in terms of possession, they dominate in terms of shots on goal, they dominate in terms of total shots, they dominate in terms of corners and so on. Does that help you predict who's going to win? There's a difference between statistics when you look after the event and say, I now understand why that team won or that player won, and what helps you predict who's going to win or what the odds should be. And I think strokes gained and things like that, like the greens and regulation, other statistics are very good at explaining why a score was recorded on a particular hole, but they're not particularly useful, or the marginal use in terms of how much extra they add to your understanding of betting or the probability of winning is really quite marginal. So there's a lot of focus on stats. Okay, it's like an XG in football. expected goals in football. It's great to understand after the event, but you need to understand a lot more before to say who's going to win in terms of, are you going to beat the odds? Okay. And I think that's where you want to look at other kind of statistics. Okay. So course form, current form, we toss them as your starting point. I look at other things, such as if you're looking at course form, it's not just course form who's done well, but okay, who's got a top 20 finish on a particular course in the last 5 years. Okay, it doesn't matter if you've done rubbish in the other occasions, but it's got a top 20 finish, there's something there. Who's got a top 20 finish in the last couple of months? Again, there's some kind of element there. I look at players who have not done well the previous week. There's always an overreaction from bookies in terms of, oh, they played well this week, so therefore they're going to play well that week. Mm-hmm. So players who have gone through had a strong finish in this last week tends to be poor betting value. Players who missed the cut tend to be really good betting value the next week. So there's a lot of nuances of other kind of data you can look at that isn't the new, the on vogue kind of statistics. A little bit like XG for football or stroke gain for golf. There's lots of stats. Not everything is useful from a betting standpoint or has much impact in terms of helping understand probability of something winning.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I suppose as well, it's quite good to gauge the performance of up-and-coming players, perhaps players that have come from the Corn Ferry Tour or from other parts of the world who maybe you don't have the same amount of data. People don't know how they perform on certain courses, and you're able to use data like that to evaluate their contextual skill level against some of the other players on the tour. I'm just thinking of recent years. You've had Victor Hovland, you've had Sam Burns, Max Homer, players who obviously, I don't know where they came through, but now they've won a bunch of events. They're always going to be relatively short prices. We had Wyndham Clark recently, and notably he'll be the same now. I suppose it's quite good for identifying players like that.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But the thing about golf is, like you said, there's a lot of players who switch between tours, who either promote from Corn Ferry Tour to the PGA Tour, or because they're the same thing with the DP World Tour. Top 10 players on the DP World Tour earn cars to the PGA Tour. A lot of players play across tours. So you need to have some kind of metric that takes into account the field value, how you did in one event relative to another. Even on the PGA Tour, these new elevated events have much stronger fields. Finishing 10th in one of those events is not the same as finishing 10th in a non-elevated event. So part of what we did right from the very start with Tour Tips is to say we use what's called an adjusted score, and it's adjusted for field quality on that particular day. It's an independent metric. We use Jeff Sagarin's famous statistician on Golf Week. They report the Sagarin Index for golfers. They've done that since the 1990s. And we use as our metric for field quality. It's independent, it's external. And therefore, if you measure your score relative to the field, okay, what's the average value for players in that field? You can compare a score in one particular week and compare it to another one. It's whether it's in an event in Asia or it's an event on a PGA Tour, 70 in the two events are very different. And that's what we've done. That eases the ability to compare players as they progress up to tours or they move across tours. And like I say, it's central statistical analysis to do that, okay? But it makes it much easier to evaluate performance if you've got a consistent benchmark of quality, not just of an individual score or performance in a given week.
That does make sense. It feels a bit like a sectional timing for racing, which goes beyond horse 1-1. It tells you how quickly they raced at during at different points. So you can actually compare on a very simplistic basis, what did they beat?
Yeah.
So that certainly does make sense. How about other things? Because I know I've listened to people like Rufus Peabody, who's a big golf bettor. I think he does a lot on weather. I know tee times is something else. Are those other things that you're able to bring into this? Or I guess weather's quite changeable, but tee time certainly might make an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I think tee time, it's one of the things we do. On our stats, you can go on the website, you can go all the way back to 1999 and you can get the stats and the tips are available for that particular week. We keep it archived. And the key thing for us is that the stats you look at this week, you should be able to go back to last year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever, and say, if I've got an Excel file, it shows me the stats are available that week. It shows me the finishing positions. I can compare and look for trends and see what works in that particular week. And on the PGA and DP World Tour, that includes what's called the AM/PM splits. Okay, so it's what we could term our in-running stats. So it shows you what was the scoring average in round 1 and round 2 for those players who started in the morning. So they're normally as a block, and those players who started in the afternoon. Now, in most events, it kind of evens out over the 2 days. But obviously, there are some particular courses or some particular locations where it works the other way. I think one of the things I found when I looked at this a while ago is in events in Arizona, they tended to have an afternoon, an advantage for players who played in the afternoon over the morning. I think it's because it's particularly cold in the morning in Arizona. But by and large, there's generally a small advantage to the Thursday morning starts. Okay, that's part of the reason why I tend to wait until Tuesday for posting tips for the DP World Tour, because I'm waiting for the tee times, because the DP World Tour goes around the world. You can have really variable weather conditions depending on where you're at. It's less so on the PGA Tour. So it's something to take into account. I think if you're going to play first round leader market, it's absolutely crucial to look at that weather forecast for the first round. But I think it's pretty minimal once you get over the course of the tournament, okay, unless you've got something particularly extreme in terms of weather. The only thing I would say is that weather's a good angle to look at. One of the things we look at and provide is situational stats, which is weather. And it shows for each player in each field, what is their average score? What's their scoring average of the last 3 years in the hot conditions, wet conditions, windy conditions, and then what it is in everything else. So you can get a benchmark. Say, does that player do well in wind? Does that player do better in wet weather or not? So you can get a bit of an angle. If you know it's going to be a wet or relatively windy, or you're playing on a seaside course, links golf, for example, you're playing on a seaside course, you know it's going to be, there's wind going to be a factor. You can have a quick look at that table and you can rank them. That's the players who've done the best over the last 3 years in terms of scoring average on wind. Is that better than what they normally do? That could be a player that the bookie's not going to pick up. Okay, I think they're going to be normally 100 to 1 shot, but if it's going to be a bit of a wind, they should be priced nearer to 50 or 66 to 1.
Sure.
And that's kind of the data that comes in to help provide those little angles that provide the real betting opportunities in golf.
Yeah, that's great. So all kinds of interesting to learn about some of the data and the analysis you can do, because most of us who follow golf know about what score someone hit. Jason Day was 22 under par on his recent win, but how about everything else prior to that and around that and the context of his performance? So that's good. Let's talk then about the tours, because there's 3, I know you cover quite a few of them, some of the smaller ones, but the 3 major ones let's perhaps focus on. We've got the PGA Tour, DP World, and now Live Golf. I imagine you approach each tour slightly differently, especially the DP World Tour could have an event in Asia, and the next week it could well be in Europe. Do you have a favorite from a betting perspective? And what are some of the nuances people should consider about betting on each of those tours?
Of those 3, I think by far the PGA Tour is my favourite. It's the one that's most consistent week in, week out. The courses are not massively different from one another. It's the one that the bookies pay most attention to, so it can be a little harder to make more money on it, but it's the one in which you can get the most liquidity on in terms of Betfair, and the bookies will take your money on it. And I just find that a good leading tour in terms of world golf. They're actively promoting betting as well, and think that's good. The DP World Tour, like you say, it travels all around the world. And that means your courses, it even travels from country to country, even within Europe. And your courses can be extremely different from one week to another. Now, what that means is that you've got to do a lot more homework. But if you do the homework in terms of this is the course setup, this is what's happened on the course previously, these are the things that worked on that particular course or in that particular region, you can really find that's very profitable. But it's really a lot more erratic because there's much more variability of fields from week in to week out because you change location so often. I find there can be much less value. I think the bookies are much less competitive when it comes to odds for the DP World Tour as they are for the PGA Tour. Okay, certainly you get much less places as a general rule. So I like the DP World Tour. I think it's a much more interesting tour to bet on. I think the rewards to the homework are really there. Live Golf, I really enjoy watching Live Golf. I must admit, it's quite entertaining. I've been watching golf for decades. For someone whose primary approach is statistical, for something that's only in the second season, I don't have enough data on it yet to really say I'm confident this is what's going to work.
I was going to ask you, how do you model that? How would you model a tour like Live Tour, 54 holes versus 72? And some of these players, you have to question some of their motivations as well.
Well, that's it. 54 holes is plenty enough time. Okay. I draw the line at 36-hole tournaments. We certainly had them in 2020 with the pandemic, and we were looking for all kind of minor tours that were running for things to bet on and provide stats for. But in terms of league golf, 54 holes is plenty. But you're right, there's a really wide range of players who have at the peak or just beyond the peak of their career. There are players who are upcoming, there are players who really got very little chance of winning. And a lot of it's around motivation. I think the thing that really showed that was when Henrik Stenson he resigned as European Ryder Cup captain for the next Ryder Cup in Italy. And he joined Live Golf, and that first week he won. Henrik Stenson hasn't won in years, and he hasn't come anywhere near winning since. But for that 1 week, he was just incredible. I think there's a lot of things I can't model statistically there. Like Cameron Smith is one of the best players in the world, but he hasn't looked like he's been doing anything but enjoying himself on that tour until last week when he was in a playoff. That's difficult, but at the same time, that makes it difficult for the bookies. And I think if you can do a bit of homework, or you've got a bit of a sense of what's really happening on that tour, it can be profitable because the bookies are really don't know what to make of it yet either. I just think from a statistical point of view, say I didn't do anything with it for a year because I think just watch and see what happens, and I'm dipping my toe into it. But it's very much for fun rather than anything serious yet.
Just from the perspective of the field size, I guess you've got 48 players and some bookmakers are offering up to 8 places. It's just a mathematical equation where you're so much more likely to get a place than otherwise, and you've got less contenders, and perhaps you can rule a few of the real outsiders who making up the numbers perhaps. And you mentioned Stenson, I think Charles Howell, how many times has he actually won versus being in contention? And then the Spanish guys at Lopez, he won in Bangkok, and there's been a few. So just curious as to that approach. How about the other tours? Because I suppose the issue is, as you start to drill into these tours, if you have access to data or you know a bit more than the bookmakers, they're probably not paying much attention to it. You probably won't get a Betfair market on most Corn Ferry Tour or Champions Tour events. I imagine that's because you can find a pretty good edge on these tours.
Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah, my personal favourite is the Champions Tour. Again, you're looking at a field of 78 players and 5 places at standard. If I give you an example of how much it's changed in the last 20 years, I was in Florida, family holiday, 2005, and I remember it well because my family's very used to me just being absent on a Sunday. A, watching the golf, and B, all the data collection. I remember because for years, all you could do is just follow the leaderboard live on the PGA Tour website. And I could actually watch live Champions Tour golf. And I ticked up Tom Pertzer to win this event in 2005. And it was 33-1 at Boyle Sports. And I got £100 each way on it. And I was looking at this thinking, he won. Okay. Next, I pocketed £4,000. I thought, this has been a really good contribution to holiday. I was really happy. And I'm looking now thinking I could probably get £1 at most on with Boyle Sports with Champions Tour. That's how much it's changed. And I think that the smaller tours, they offer a lot more advantage for making money because the bookies, they pay the most attention to PGA Tour. They're fairly honed in on the DP World Tour, but other than that, they're putting up the odds and they're not paying much attention to them. And I think you can get some really good betting angles there that are really profitable, but without Betfair, it's right. What can you do to get on? A few quid. I mean, I've been in so many accounts. I'm just doing it for fun with the other tours. Okay, but if you can get more on, then these are really profitable tours to bet on, particularly Champions Tour, LPGA, all kind of things like that.
The Champions Tour is the older players, right, who are basically too old for the PGA.
Yeah, once you reach 50. You can get onto the senior tours as such, okay? And It's really great in terms of a betting performance because, with the exception of Bernhard Langer, who just defies logic, once you reach the age of 55, you're not competitive anymore. And that's over half the field. So you've got approximately 30 players competing for 5 places. You get top 5, you're going to get a payoff. And it can be really good odds of securing at least a place. Okay, it's been my most profitable tour over the last 20 odd years by far.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit like the Masters, really. You can rule out such a large proportion of the field before a ball has been hit, because obviously some of them are, who was it who retired this year? I can't remember now. Sandy Lyle. And I remember there was a bookmaker who was doing a pinata pick, they called it, which was a random pick. And I think it was 66 to 1. And I thought to myself, well, I might as well take that because, I'm probably going to get the odd Sandy Lyle, but I'm probably going to get a DJ or going to get Rory or something like that and get 66 to 1 for it. So I think I got Thomas Peters 3 times, so I gave up after that. So, but yeah, that certainly makes sense if you can get on the Champions Tour and say Bernhard Langer continues to defy the laws of physics and Father Time, because he always seems to do quite well. You mentioned there about your own betting. Let's talk a little bit about that. Is that something you take seriously, or is it always a hobby? How does that fill up your time these days?
Like I say, I think for the golf, it is more fun. Like I say, I'm limited at pretty much all my outs nowadays, so it's pretty much for fun. I'll do some on Betfair. If I'm betting seriously, it's on other sports where I can use Betfair for horse racing or greyhound racing. A bit of basic statistical analysis, analytics will provide edges that I find much more profitable. But golf's a passion. Even though I've been severely limited elsewhere, it's still the fun thing to do. And even if it's just a few quid, then it takes off. I'm not going to get rich from betting on all these minor tours, but I do find they are much better betting opportunities. And that's why I said with the Tour Tips approach, it's not just providing that in-depth statistical analysis for the PGA Tour. We're going to do it for as many tours as possible because you can get up to 20 different tours. You can get bookmakers odds on. Why not provide someone out there who's betting on it for Sky Bet and Bet365 and these other companies to provide these odds? Why not provide a service and help them, find an edge? They might get gubbed. They might get limited. Okay. So enjoy it while you can.
Yeah. So was it more serious for you before you did too well and then you got limited? Is that how it went for you, like most people?
Yeah, I think golf betting, I've been doing this for decades and it has fundamentally changed from how it was to what it is now. And that change partly became because of the rise of Betfair, and the bookies had to adjust accordingly. And that old-fashioned, we'll take your money and see who kind of knows the best approach has gone. And it's very different now. They're being counted and controlled, and bookies are much quicker to restrict accounts. Certainly in the last 15 years. But that's the change it is. Okay, and we're going to live with it. And Betfair provides great opportunities for people who are otherwise limited. But in golf, it limits you to the DP World Tour and PGA Tour, really, where there's any serious liquidity.
No, yeah, there's not so much on the others at all. Even the live golf is quite limited. Yeah. And I presume you do hit the exchanges as best you can for some of the golf action these days. Have you seen much, and if one of the stories at the moment is affordability and reduction in the amount of people who can bet with Betfair, just because they're limited in terms of what they can deposit, and if they want to send on mortgage statements and bank statements to prove that they can afford to bet. First question would be, do you use it yourself, and where do you use it? And second, have you seen any adjustment in recent times because of those issues?
I haven't really seen it, to be honest. I must admit, I just use the one bank account I think if I declare that bank account to my mortgage company, they become extremely worried, because that's the one account I use for the money goes in, the money goes out from bookies and Betfair and so on. Yeah. I like to keep everything separate rather than a kind of a main general account as such. Mm-hmm. I've not really had any problems with the exchanges. I think, again, as an alternative bookies, I think liquidity is good. I just wish there was competition to Betfair, I must admit. The premium charges that we have to pay, but until there's a viable competitor to Betfair, then that we just got to live with it. I don't think there's any way around it.
And I understand, I don't know if you have, or you mentioned you or some others have done consultancy in the betting industry. Has that been working on things like this, or helping firms with their golf offering, or are you very much on the punting side these days?
Well, that's my day job.
Okay.
So that's where I work for the dark side.
Again, I learned that at the end of the podcast. Okay.
Yeah, the things I enjoy, which is the betting side and the tour tips and all the golf and all the rest of it. And analytics. The stuff I do as a day job around the statistics, the analytics, data analytics, sports analytics. Through that day job, that's where I've done a lot of work for companies in the past. And yeah, they have a lot of money. They're prepared to throw it at people who have more knowledge than they have, particularly in this big data era.
Of course, it certainly makes sense. So yeah, it's interesting. So anything else you can tell us on that? Are bookmakers, because there is a sense that many of the soft bookmakers are only really not really interested in sharpening their odds and their lines. They're more interested in just removing sharp punters. You'd have to go to Pinnacle Sports and places like that where they're interested in it. Are bookmakers actually really that bothered? Because especially when it comes to golf, they know that's a losing proposition during a Masters week or whatever it is. They're offering 12 places, and you can back Rory McIlroy finishing the top 12 at 10-1 or whatever it might be. Is that something they are really interested in, invested in sharpening their prices?
Certain ones are. Certainly in terms of my dealings, Pinnacle's a great example. They closed off to the European market, which is a real shame. Yeah, certainly a big loss for me when they closed my account down. That's gone back a number of years now. It's a number of the bigger firms that are very much want to engage in this data analytics, make sure it's really sharp lines and so on. And there's a lot of sports analytics consulting companies who've been created who will help feed into and provide odds services for the bookies. So it's becoming not just as much relying on sharp punters in terms of identifying where the risks may be in prices, but a lot of this is now in terms of consultancy companies who provide this analysis and this analytics to help guide markets and make sure that they're sharper from the outset. And that means those companies tend to be less flexible in terms of what players they deem to be sharp as such. So you're much more likely to get gubbed nowadays than you were in the past.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was going to ask you about that, but I think we've covered that. Yes, that makes sense. Obviously, being outsourced things like data and analytics to sharpen their prices. And that makes sense. So in terms of golf, we've talked about where it's come from and the changes over time. What do you see happening in the next few years from data perspective and a betting perspective? Because I know that there's another side, a competitor to yours, no doubt. Data golf is increasing in popularity. And again, that's got lots of similar stats. I don't know, I think Pinnacle use them, or some of the firms, their stats go up and it does change the market, and they're out there. So we're interested in how you feel data is going to be brought in and used and where the betting markets might go.
Yeah, very familiar with data golf and Corshane Brothers. If you concentrate on the PGA Tour, it really is data rich. And a lot of that data is extremely useful in terms of content, extremely useful in terms of people who are interested in golf. I'm going to say a lot of it might not be that useful in terms of a betting edge. What would you use to say, right, I'm going to understand how I'm going to derive an edge of the bookies? And I think that's touched on that earlier. What they're really good at is they've got high-level data and they're really good at the data visualization. I really appreciate the amount of effort they put into that. And a lot of that stuff is free to access. And so therefore their stuff is sourced very widely within the media. Okay, and fair play to them, they worked hard to do that. I prefer to keep mine a little bit more behind a paywall because it helps protect people who have those statistics. Because my main focus is try and help you find an angle relative to the bookie. Where's your edge relative to the odds? And if I just made that available across the board, then I think that edge goes. So mine's a slightly different focus in that respect. Mm-hmm. I think there's an awful lot of data in there. PGA Tour are really promoting data. They're promoting gambling. They are moving very much. They're trying to move forward is betting on individual holes kind of thing as a way forward, or individual shots. I'm not sure how much that is going to take off. That is one of the main problems with golf. You sit on a bet for 4 days, who's going to win the tournament? And there's highs and lows, and the player looks like he's going to win, and ultimately he doesn't. I mean,
know that too well.
Absolutely. Yeah, and now one of the, the SBC, one of your services that you provide, so I've forgotten the name, they tipped the top 2 in Europe last week.
Oh yeah, Weekly Golf Value. Yes, we had the 2 Swedes.
Which was incredible. We tipped Dantorp for 150-1, and he was leading with 1 hole. We started with 4 holes to play, and then he ultimately finished the shot behind in second. And you go, oh my God. It's one of those painful things. With horse racing, grain racing, even 90 minutes of football, yeah, there's always another match quite soon afterwards. You can pick yourself up and do something. Golf draws you out over 4 weeks and 4 days, and that can be quite interesting, let's say,
Definitely.
enjoyable, but ultimately it's enjoyable if you're winning. That's the bottom line. In terms of the data, they're trying to make it shorter, much more on gambling, daily fantasy sports in the US in particular, trying to get it into a shorter time frame is a major focus. And I think that's interesting. It's not my area, but it's certainly something that we think it's going to get more traction in the UK and beyond. Then whilst a crowded market, we'll certainly move into it and see what of help, trends and angles we can provide for it.
Yeah, because they say the PGA have started to embrace betting as it's become legalized in the US. Although in the UK and other countries, it seems a bit of a dirty word now to say you work in betting. Or I don't think we'll see Sky Sports. I don't know why. They do it with football. I don't know why. Or they used to do it more with football. But on Sky Sports Golf, for example, they would have some odds. You can just see how it would work to who's going to win this hole or whatever it might be. Will he put this or not? Bet on it. 10 to 11. Yeah, yes or no. So it's interesting. So obviously, the more options, the more volume, the more ways to get on, if you like. It's good to see that. I think from a punting perspective, it's good to see that getting a bit more focused, especially from the North American side. So I was going to ask you as well, I haven't talked about I mentioned really your tips, because you do put up tips every week across all the main tours. I did mention at the top, actually, and we did a review a couple of years ago in a piece, and we continue to track because it's all for free, isn't it? You put up, I think, a trio of selections for the PGA every week with reasonings. And I found over the last few years, we've got a 35% ROI from those. That's on the PGA Tour is exceptional. And the majority of the time, that's not taking advantage of place terms. You can actually get pretty good prices on the exchanges as well. It's worth giving that a push if you want to tell people when they go up and how they can follow them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, generally we have our PGA tips provided sort of a Monday night or relatively early on a Tuesday. We try and get that reasonably early. The market's well settled. We're not going to put things when the markets are first set up on a Monday morning. There are lots of values being made there, but there's no point putting up tips unless people can actually get on themselves at those prices. So we wait till the market's fully formed, and that means Monday night, the very earliest. From that point onwards, it's DP World Tour. Put tips up for the DP World Tour on a Tuesday, normally late Tuesday afternoon. Tee times are available. The market's fully formed, and then the other tours will be on a Wednesday, because that's when the most bookmakers will have started to price up those events, those tours. And I think that's where the most money is in terms of profit and ROI. But like I say, we wait till the market settles. There's no fun trying to claim after the event, I could get 200 to 1 when people come on and say, actually, I could only see 50 to 1. We want people to be able to see what we see.
Yeah.
And if that means we get worse prices because we're not those big odds, then that's it. That's the difference between tipping and personal betting. I'll jump in on a Monday morning. If I see a price, I go, I'll take that. Thank you very much. But it's not going to be a tip, not unless everybody else can get on there. So they're always free to access. And you go onto a website, it's on the homepage. You just click on tips next to each tour and it's there. And if it's not there yet, then scroll to the bottom of the page. It'll tell you when it's been updated. But again, the general timelines, Monday night or Tuesday daytime PGA Tour, Tuesday afternoon UK time for DP World Tour, everything else on a Wednesday.
Yeah, and it's worth following, because I think you can also get an update email. So I get an email that tells me there's been a notification, the update on the PGA. I click on it and it takes me to that page and I can see those tips. And I think the point you make there about betting later in the week or when the market is formed is a really important one. I know there's been a lot of debate on social media. You're probably very aware of this, but some tipsters who are quite good, don't get me wrong, but put up bets far too early in the week. You're putting up a bet in the DP World Tour when there's $2,000 traded on it, and maybe there's on the market entirely, and then there's perhaps £50 that have been matched on your player. Straight away, those odds are going to get slashed. A, because the reputation, and B, because the Betfair market is going to get gobbled up. And even though they can sometimes rebound it, it's the difference between sometimes the theoretical and the practical obtaining of a price. And I think that's important. And so what you're doing with putting it up when the market is liquid is really impressive in terms of the record you've been able to obtain over a long time. So I do encourage people to go check it out, because you probably don't get the same amount of traction because you don't work for them. You're not published on a major betting website like some people who do this. It's important. That's why one of the reasons I wanted to get you on to explore what you do and to showcase a little bit more about the quality on offer. Not just the tips, which are there for anybody, but also the data and the thought that has gone into all of this and the impressive work that you do. really appreciate your time today, Stanley, and sharing what you can and explaining a little bit about golf and data and what you do. To round things off today, do you want to share some links? Obviously the website and Twitter or anything else that you feel people might want to go and find out what you do?
Yeah, website, we've referred to this as Tour Tips. It is tour-tips.com. And you can find our posts, little tidbits about stats that will be helpful this week, as well as our tips on Twitter. And that's on the hashtag at golf_stats. So golf stats with the underscore between the two words. Okay. Find us on there. There's golf betting community on Twitter, and we're part of that and we feed into it. But hopefully, like I say, even if you're just looking for tips, take a look at the free course form and current form stats. What we're trying to do with our PGA, at least with our PGA previews, is to show that here's the tips, but these are the stats to look at. Okay, so even if you can't get that, you don't have an account with that particular bookie, or you can't get that particular price, these are things to look for, help you find your own sound reasoning for gambling on golf. It's a good thing to use stats with, and it's highly profitable. As hopefully our records show, we've had one losing year since 2009. We've been going since 1999. A lot of our odds, I'm tipping up. We talked earlier about 150 to 1 last week. Mm-hmm. A lot of our odds are big odds. You're going to get that in golf. So you're not going to win in every event. You're not going to win in every week. But this is why multiple events in the week and over the course of a year, there's going to be downturns. There always are when you're betting at those kind of odds. But it's a kind of sport in which, with a bit of homework and a bit of stats analysis, you can find some really big edges. And they might not win every single week, but over the course of a season, across different tours, they certainly will. And it's highly profitable.
Yeah, absolutely it is. I know I've used it and continue to use it. Find it a great resource. If people just want the tips, they can get them. If they want to dig into the reasoning behind it, they can do that. If they want to explore all the stats and data, that's there too. So it appeals to all different people, from those that don't have the time or interest, but to those who do. It's something that you can lose a lot of time in, I know, when you start to dig into some of this information, because for those of you that like data, certainly I think you'll enjoy exploring what's on offer. So thank you ever so much for your time today, Stanley. Really appreciate you taking the time out to do this podcast and sharing all your expertise with us. And I encourage people to go and sign up to your website and go find out more about what you offer. So thank you ever so much, and I wish you all the best for the rest of this year, and I look forward to watching how Tour Tips continues to grow. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, mate.